público es tuyo.
Gracias. All right, so I am going to start with a story, and
Ok,
I,
chicos. Uy,
I used to travel a lot.
¿Puedes entrar? Hola, agilistas de Colombia. Estamos con Toby y va a estar Jim. También estamos con el soporte de Juan Pablo y Moisés. Conocí a Toby en un evento de ágiles coaching a nivel mundial y él quiere hoy compartir con nosotros en Colombia. Toby, bienvenido a Ágiles Colombia. Gracias por participar y el tiempo y el público es tuyo.
Muchas gracias. Gracias. Uh, Jim, are you there with me?
I'm here.
Okay,
We're
excellent.
good. Yep.
Thank you. We are very excited to be here to present in Colombia. Very, very happy. So I will start with a story. I used to travel a lot, and during one of my travels, I was in New York City, and I had an experience which changed my view of thinking about a lot of things. So I'm going to share my story. Hay una historia de mi experiencia cuando viajando en Ciudad de New York. So I had this lamp next to my bed. Tengo esta luz in my bedroom in the hotel. And in the night, when I was trying to turn off the light, I could not find the switch anywhere. And I finally found it. It's behind the lamp. In the morning, it was still dark. I wake up at 5 o'clock, still dark. And when I tried to turn the light on, my hand get hurt because of the pineapple. Tiene una piña. And I thought to myself, this is not a good design. Whoever designed this is not a good design. And after a few weeks, I was in Chicago in a different hotel for travel, and I come across this lamp in the hotel, and I think to myself that this whoever designed this lamp really put a lot of thought into designing this lamp because it has USB power. The switch is right next to the bottom, is easy to reach. So my question is, when you are designing software, do you only think about working software, or do you think about the users, the people who are actually going to use the system? So that is my story, and that's what I learned from it, that before you design a product, you really have to think about how the people are going to use the product. So what does that mean? It means in software development, is user experience, is it important? What happens if you don't think of the user? So in case of the hotel, if they don't think of the user, I probably don't want to stay in that hotel because my hand get hurt. So they're going to lose business. If we don't think about the user, we are going to lose business. And what happens when you listen to the user? You get more insight, you get more idea, you understand what they're trying to do, and you design the softwares in slow iteration to meet the customer needs. So it's definitely clear that you have to integrate Agile and UX, right? Es muy claro que necesita integrar agilidad con UX. So, ¿cuáles los beneficios? So, primero es que mejor enfocarse en el cliente, que mejor understanding of what the customer needs, and is better end user value for the customer, is more efficient, because if you make mistake in the end and the users, you don't get their input till the end, you would have lost a lot of time. So it's more efficient if you're talking to the customer throughout the process. And alta calidad, better quality, because you are already looking at what the users are going to use. And because you're working with the customers and the users, uh, is better chance, better collaboration, better usage, maybe more sales. And last but not least, is better visibility and better transparency. So overall, it's a win-win situation when you integrate Agile with UX. So let's talk about, we understand the benefit. How is it different? And I would like to bring my co-presenter, his UX guru, Jim.
So while there's a lot of similarities and they fit together very well, there are some key differences. And one of the things with a lot of UX is there's a kind of strategic focus. We're looking at the big picture. We're trying to create ideas and new approaches. We're trying to find things that really make the right kind of product, and the right kind of product for the user, not necessarily for the stakeholder or for the business or for the developer, but we're focused on what will have impact in the marketplace on the customer. So most of all, it's focused on the user. And a lot of our approaches and a lot of the things we think about is really looking in that direction, is what's going to have a long-term strategic and tangible impact with the customer themselves.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
So now we understand the benefits, like difference from a UX perspective. Let's look about the opposite is Agile, right? So UX is big picture, but Agile is value based. UX is ideation, right? You get con ideación, and the the focus of Agile is delivery. How can we deliver in a more constant, predictable manner? And the driver for Agile is efficiency, whereas UX is always looking for what is the right solution for the customer. And the other thing is the focus is on the user for UX, versus in Agile, it's always team focused. So now let's talk about what happens when you blend it together, right? That's the goal and focus of our talk is how do you take UX and Agile and make it to work together? And that's where that's where the yin and yang happens. So the benefit is that it unifies the team and it elevates cross-functional capability. So you are bringing more skills to your team so that they can produce better. And together, everybody's focused on making the customer happy. So that extra benefit, extra ideas of solving the customer problem becomes more prominent. And one of the things that I have seen in my personal life is that a lot of times we are just focused in our area. But then when you bring two teams together, it's a bigger picture. You are able to see things in a broader perspective. And the delivery is more better aligned because user experience does a lot of research up front. So there is less risks and the delivery becomes, so there are less surprises in the end. And last but not, it reduces silos. So there you have it, what happens when you do this blending. So now Agile, as you know, and it's going to be 20 years in February 11th to 14th, I think, 13th, when the Agile manifesto is going to be 20 years, right? 20 años. So how does UX fit in with the Agile manifesto? So the first one is individuals and interactions over process and tools. So by adding more specialized people to the skills, you're actually bringing and making the team stronger, right? And instead of understanding, okay, what is the other team doing? What are the UX processes? Everybody understands how it is done and they work together. The next part is working software. So this is, not just working software, but we are putting software that people are actually going to love. So this is very important. And next is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And because you are already thinking about what the customer is looking for, because UX does a lot of research upfront, they are able to bring a lot of insight before. So it makes it even better. And last is the clarity. You know upfront what are some of these changes that are going to happen. It's less surprises. So they definitely it's much better. So hopefully it makes sense and you're able to follow. The next, I would like to ask Jim to please come and present and share with us some of the ideas from a UCD design UX perspective. Jim?
Yeah. So before we dive into how UX can work successfully with Agile, let's just clarify a little bit of the nomenclature real quick. I know here in the States, people talk about user-centered design, HCD, user experience design, all these things that sound similar. They're pretty puzzling and confusing. They may have subtle differences, but in reality, they're all the same kind of thing. I know everybody talks about them a little bit differently, but really the key thing here is you're trying to create software and applications where you've put the user, the people that will be interacting with the software first. And not just putting them first, but actually spending time talking with them, having them interact with the software, observing those interactions. That's really the key thing that separates sort of graphic design or other forms of design from the user-centered design. So really not a lot of difference there. And the key is putting the user first in how we think about how things are made. Now let's turn to how UX can fit in nicely with Agile. And while Agile was coming together, UX was moving toward lean. And these two things go very, very nicely together. And the key is that UX has put together an approach that's very, very flexible and adaptable. It's not rigid. There's not a really prescribed set of steps that you have to do each time. It allows you to adapt and adjust to circumstances in a way that's very similar to Agile development. I like to say it's not a cookbook, it's a set of tools. So you don't sit down and say, oh, I'm going to start with personas, I'm going to do a card sort, I'm going to build a prototype. It's really a wide variety of different things that you can mix and match based upon your circumstances and on your goals. So you want to look at what's going on with the users, what's going on with your application development timeframes, money, strategy, all these things come into play. And you kind of pick the tool set that works best to solve these problems. And the next slide will show you a little bit of some of the different tools that are available. And again, on a large project that's complex, we may apply many or all of these. on shorter projects or more tactical features, we may just find one or two. And the goal here is to think seriously about what you're trying to accomplish and find the tool that matches with that and gets it done in an efficient but rigorous kind of way. So because of this flexibility, you're able to adjust your time frames, you're able to adjust your results. It's really a very flexible thing that allows you to integrate nicely with Agile. And try to avoid being dogmatic in approach to UX, and that will help improve your integration within an Agile framework.
Excellent. Carlos, would you like to give a quick synopsis before we go further? Because we did cover a lot of information. Maybe if you can summarize a little bit, that could help our audience.
Yes, for sure. Yo quiero contarle a la audiencia, bueno, lo que hemos estado o lo que nos han estado presentando Jim y Toby. ¿Por qué? Porque es algo que yo he visto en la práctica. O sea, nosotros en los proyectos en donde estamos ahora, contamos con la definición de que todo equipo tiene un UX involucrado. O sea, hoy en día nuestros equipos tienen un UX y qué ha hecho de cara a el resultado final que estamos logrando eso que plantea Jimmy. Jim plantea, oye, es importante tener esta caja de herramientas y hoy en día nosotros ya estamos trabajando en algo que llamamos un design system. I want to go to English in
Okay.
order to ask to Jim, this toolbox is could be understood as a digital system in the teams that are working with Agile and UX. Could you share us the design system concept that for me is very important in order to use in this integration between Agile and UX?
So right, we talked a little bit about tools, but there is a sort of systematic approach, and it starts off with uh, kind of strategic ideation. You think a little bit about where you need to go. Usually, there's a set of research where you look into what can we learn initially about a user, what can sort of ground our understanding, and then next we move on to a step of kind of feature generation. What are the kinds of features that may solve, once we've understood the problem, how do we then go about solving the problem? What are the things that may or may not create a useful solution for the user? And it's all iterative. Then we would go back and interact with users again to see if that feature set we've come up with is valid and holds up. Does it solve the problems in a way that we thought? And then if you've got a good feature set, then you go on and do a prototype. You build out those features to a certain extent. You go back again to the users and go, okay, here are the features that we thought you would like. Do they make sense? Are you able to understand them? Do they integrate with the other features in a way that's sensible and creates a workflow or a useful interaction? And after you get that feedback, you go in and kind of fine tune and finally develop out these features. And again, if there's time, you go back again and say, all right, now is this usable? Is this easy? Is this something that works very fluid and is easy to understand and follow? Doesn't need a long instruction manual. You can kind of pick it up and go with it. And so you go through these steps of sort of narrowing. You start very broad and you move on to very, very specific. So that's really the process. And you may have to skip steps or shorten steps if you've got a short time frame. If you've got a longer time frame, you may do some of them multiple times.
Parte de lo que nos está comentando Jim es la importancia de que en los equipos que trabajan con esta visión de Agile y UX mezclado, trabajen mucho en el hacer research en campo y que no sea solamente el equipo de UX el que va y hace esta investigación, sino que lo hace todo como un equipo. Y un tema que enfatiza Jim y que me parece excelente compartirlo en español es importante hacer el prototipo basado en lo que se identifica en el research y luego validar si ese prototipo está cumpliendo con la hipótesis y nuevamente volver a iterar. Es una constante iteración de prototipo, pero el prototipo es un producto final. Voy a validar con Jim, le quiero hacer la pregunta de si ese prototipo siempre es un release. Jim, I have one question about the prototype.
Mhm.
Did you consider that the prototype in this mix between Agile and UX is a prototype or is a product that could be used on production? Is a minimum value product or is a prototype a prototype that I could be bought to the crash and reconsider to rebuild? What is the difference between prototype and minimal product value?
Right. So endless debates about this, and it's a very excellent question. The real answer I would give is it really depends upon your circumstances and your situation. If you're on a short time frame, prototypes can be as simple as sketches on paper or quick Illustrator or Photoshop comps. If there's more time and more budget, way more elaborate, fully functional, sometimes even coded software. So it really depends upon what you're trying to accomplish and your time and budget. So like I said, UX is flexible. You weigh all those considerations. You think about how those things affect your final product. The goal is to get as much user impact in key parts of the product as you go along. But there's no specific time and place, or there's a lot of flexibility. So you can kind of pick and choose based upon your budget and time frames.
Súper, muchas gracias.
Mhm.
Eh, Comentarle a la audiencia en español que Jim lo que nos hace caer en cuenta en varios aspectos. Uno, el contexto del producto que se está construyendo es importante y es lo que moviliza entre prototipar y en entregar producto. Y eso es importante que el equipo que está trabajando con marco ágil y UX lo esté evaluando constantemente. Y también trae a colación aspectos de teoría de restricciones o constraint restrictions para saber que hay un budget, que hay una expectativa de timeless o de time box de entrega de valor y que siempre se valide la usabilidad del producto y en la caja de herramientas, por ejemplo, están los test de usabilidad. ¿Sí? El usability testing ayuda a validar la dirección de lo que es el equipo está desarrollando. Toby, we can continue with the slides.
Okay, thank you so much for your commentary. All right, so let's think about the challenge or problems that can happen. So we understand that they are both have values. We understood that there is a lot of benefit in integrating them, but it's not easy. There is a lot of problems that can happen if you don't plan properly. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So there are three problems or challenges that can happen. The three areas is the way the team has the structure is right. The second is cultural problem. So agile people and UX people sometimes think slightly differently and there could be political problems, there could be resistance to change. And last but not least is the problem with, if the processes are not integrated and you are trying just to integrate the people without changing the process, there could be some lot of challenges there as well. So let's explore what some of these challenges are and how we can solve them. So first area is a structural challenge. So there are two ways in which Agile and UX specialists are integrated. So on the left that you see is where you have silos. So basically, dev team is separate, UX team is separate. There is a lot of problem that can happen there because they don't have a unified way of thinking, and often there is politics or they're fighting for priorities because things are going from one team to the other back and forth. So the better way of doing it is in a more agile fashion, as you see on the right hand side. This is where the team is integrated. It's one team, and then you have a UX lead, you have a technical lead, and then you have UX researcher, you have UX designer, developer, tester, BA, what have you. So this is a better way of doing it, instead of silo. We prefer to do it in this way. But in some very large team, because sometimes the UX team has to do the work in advance. In some teams, you can still get success with this approach, with the siloed approach, but it needs to be managed better. All right, so let's think about the how do you overcome that. So you overcome that by making sure that the agile team understand their role. See, for example, the business analyst and UX researcher, their work is very similar, and you want to make sure that it is understood clearly. Jim, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I mean, you had mentioned earlier that the Agile Manifesto values individuals and interactions over processes and tools.
Right.
And this is one of those examples where, in order to overcome structural challenges, you really need to be thinking about the individuals rather than a process. As you mentioned, the business analyst and the UX researcher often have very similar approaches. They use similar tools. There's a lot of opportunity for perhaps conflict. And what you want to do, instead of pitting those two people against each other, is get them to work together successfully. You want them to think in terms of team and individual abilities, as opposed to an established process and steps and sort of claiming your territory. So if the roles aren't clearly defined and people are sort of bogged down in politics,
Right.
the BA versus UX researcher role can become a scene of conflict. And what you want to do is define those roles so that either people are able to work successfully together, or there's a clear differentiation between what each group is supposed to be doing. The BA is often usually focused more on stakeholder needs. The user researcher is more on user needs. They often use the same approaches, but they're trying to accomplish different kinds of things. The business analyst is usually working around technology constraints, as the user researcher is trying to look for strategic objectives. So there's a little bit of a different flavor of these two things, even though there's a lot of similarity. But you want to watch for this in your construction of teams and make sure that you're not setting them up for conflict, and that people that may potentially have overlapping roles have clearly defined responsibilities.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Jim,
Yes.
there is a question about, it's a question for the audience. The question says, is from Gabriel. Thank you, Gabriel, for your participation. What is the difference between UX lead and teach lead, technical lead?
So the UX lead is really focused more on the user interactions, what you're going to end up presenting to the user, what the interface will look like, what the interactions feel like, perhaps the flow of the piece of software. The technical lead, and Toby can correct me if I get this off a little bit, is really more focused on the behind the scene, how it happens, how do we enable these interactions, how do things happen. Really, in a lot of it is in a way that the user doesn't see it all, but makes it all possible.
Right. So the solution, basically, the tech lead works on the technical solution, and the UX lead works on the usability and leading the teams and making sure that the agreed upon process is being followed.
And there needs to be interaction between those two, because those two things need to work together in the end. And if they don't, you're not going to have a successful application. So those two people need to work together as a team.
Yeah.
But the ground they're covering is often very different, and there is only a little bit of overlap.
Okay.
Por
So
estar acá. Okay, Toby, go ahead. Or you want that I do the translation about the question? What do you prefer?
uh, we can take the question, go ahead and ask the question.
Ok, Gabriel, gracias por la pregunta. Trabajo contigo, Gabriel, gracias por estar. Y bueno, la diferencia está en el foco de la persona, ¿sí? En el rol de UX se enfoca en entender las necesidades del cliente, sus interacciones y su contexto y traerle esa información al equipo. Y el técnico se encarga de validar que de cara a las capacidades con las cuales se está construyendo el producto, se cumpla con la eh, necesidad del cliente y se desarrolle una correcta interacción para el usuario. Toby, go ahead.
Okay. Gracias, señor. Okay, so let's understand how can we overcome the cultural challenge. We talked about the two roles, and the important part is, as leaders or as agilists, first focus on understanding what is the cultural challenge, where is it coming from, what is the challenge, who are the people, and what are the problems they're having. And it doesn't happen overnight, it's a time taking process. The next is to build a collaborative culture, right? So if you empower your team members and help them to work together, so you go through the forming normings, and then you get to the performing stage. So giving them the time and independence to work together over a period of time, even though you have some problems in the beginning, it will get better with time as they start to do a more collaborative work. And last is transparency, right? By good communication, you are creating transparency, and that transparency will help in other people understanding where a particular team member is coming from, and that will help with removing some of the barriers and solving some of the cultural problems. Okay. And so here we have, um, we understand that definitely there is a lot of differences between the way agile teams work and the way UX teams work, team members work. And we see value in both, but in many organizations there are still a lot of friction between these two. So in our company, Ventera Systems, for many years now, we have integrated UX and Agile successfully. And the result is that the products that we create as a team, our customers love it. And we got so much new business because of that. And it reduces the problem in the end, and really we got so much new business because of our ability to get better at it. Um, Honestly speaking, it was not perfect in the beginning. We had a lot of challenges. In the beginning, it felt like Agile and UX is like very separate from each other. But as the team started to work together, they realized that UX and Agile have more things in common than not. And so it takes the right skills, it takes the right attitude, it also takes a lot of patience. So it's better to start small and then slowly make it big. In our experience, like if you try to make a big program into Agile and UX together, it could be more problems. So it's better to start with smaller programs or a smaller part of a large program, and then start, and then you can experiment and get better, and then experiment and get better, experiment and get better, and then expand it across the organization. So that is what we feel, is a good way of um, integrating and implementing Agile and UX together. Carlos, do you want to give a quick overview of what I shared?
Yes, for sure. I will be switch to the Spanish now.
Yes.
Ok, bueno, ya Toby lo que nos está diciendo es, en su experiencia en la empresa donde ellos trabajan en Ventera, ellos han logrado desarrollar esa integración entre UX y Agile. Claro, está en estos retos y Toby hace énfasis en, en estos tres aspectos que son el entender, el construir y el desarrollar empatía, transparencia y comunicación abierta. O sea, el construir un equipo con alta cohesión, en donde entender el contexto y entender la necesidad del usuario es importante,
Mhm.
en donde construir al interior del equipo una cultura orientada a responder a esas necesidades del cliente es importante y que el equipo desarrolle momentos de trabajar en empatía, trabajar en dos aspectos clave que me parece lo resalta Toby. Uno es de cara al usuario en el UX, la empatía, y de cara al trabajo en equipo en Agile, en desarrollar la comunicación abierta. Y con esos elementos se desarrolla este yin y yang de unir Agile con UX.
Guys, we have 5 more minutes.
Ok. Ok. Está abierto para preguntas.
Uh, Jim, Toby and Jim, I have one question about the in these 3 points that I mentioned in the resume in Spanish. What is the most important of these three aspects? Most important, most difficult to create and resolve in this exactly. What is the most critical and most difficult?
Is culture, in my opinion. And the reason for that is culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you have the best plans, if you have the best approach, the best strategy, even the best people, but if the culture doesn't allow for change, or there is a lot of pushback, or they feel that they are going to be uncomfortable, they are not going to cooperate, they are not going to help, they will in fact get in the way of the change. So the way to solve the culture problem, oh you is by taking these things. So if I can go back and show you the three areas that we talk about: structural, cultural, and process. From these three, in my opinion, it's going to be culture, which is the most difficult, which gets in the way. Because if the culture is correct, even if the structure is not perfect, people will still cooperate and help you with that. And a lot of times, especially in agile teams, it's more about interaction than process anyway, right? But the problem is, even if you have the right process, if culturally there is no good fit, it's going to defeat it. So my opinion is going to be culture. Jim, I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and of course, I'm going to end up in the same place. Is it's definitely culture. Um, there's some interesting things about Agile and UX. There's an inherent flexibility in the two, and if you can emphasize that flexibility, it's really easy to get a variety of UX approaches and a variety of Agile approaches to work together. If, on the other hand, you emphasize a fairly dogmatic approach to UX or Agile, and as Agile practitioners, I'm sure you've seen examples where people become very dogmatic about ceremonies and the way it's entirely possible to overdo the process side of Agile. And if you've got somebody doing that same thing on the UX side, saying, nope, these are the steps, we always do them in this order,
Yes.
you can easily end up in conflict. And so the culture is the thing that will help mitigate that.
Gracias. Nos quedan 3 minutos. Quisiera, Jim and Toby, in the last 3 minutes, tell us about you. How can we contact by networks, social networks, and how can the Latin America community could benefit of your experience, of your work, and if you have plans to coming to work together in Latin America?
After Corona. Right now, we can only work through by being here and helping, but we are more than happy to help anybody in their area, because both of us are very passionate about our areas. Uh, Jim about UX, UCD, me about Agile. You can find us on LinkedIn. It's already there in the poster. You can reach out to us, and we are happy to help with any areas. And in future, if there is an in person, when we do it in person instead of online, we would love to come there. I've been to Colombia before. I love Colombia. I love the music, and I love the culture. I love the food. I love Colombian people. So I'm happy to come any day. And so is Jim. Jim has gone there for travel, right, Jim?
Yeah, I've been there several times.
Yeah,
Beautiful place. Would
yeah,
love to go back.
yeah. We would love to come back. We love Colombian people. So anytime, just call us and we'll be there.
Yeah, for sure. Bueno, nos queda 1 minuto. Yo quiero agradecer a la audiencia, a ti, Jim, por proponerte, porque realmente fue a través de un chat que tú me enviaste, oye, Carlos. Bueno, yo publiqué el evento en el grupo que tenemos de coaches a nivel worldwide, donde estuvimos trabajando con Toby. Yo publiqué el evento y Toby me dijo, oye, Carlos, a mí me gustaría hacer una charla y bueno, creo que lo logramos. Jim, realmente tu experiencia, yo invito a que los asistentes ojalá busquen en la trayectoria de Jim y la de Toby, por supuesto, pero impresionante la experiencia y la trayectoria de Jim. Gran experto, reconocido escritor. Toby, excelente, gran coach. Tuve la oportunidad de estar contigo en un par de sesiones. Es tiempo, los invito a Toby y a Jim para que se queden en nuestra página y bueno, cerramos la transmisión por hoy. Eh, gracias por todo el trabajo.
Muchas gracias.
Quedamos en tus manos, Juan Pablo.
Thank you, guys. I hope I will really appreciate the time you take on this. Para el resto de gente, ya por favor en 5 minutos vamos a estar en la sala principal para el cierre. Les agradecemos por estar acá, por haber hecho parte de todas las sesiones. Recuerden que estas sesiones van a quedar grabadas para que puedan acceder a ellas. Agradecerles a todos por participar, Juan Pablo, a Toby, a Tim, a Carlos por habernos hecho toda la traducción. Y pues nada, nos vemos. No sé si quieras decir algo, Juan.
Nada, muchas gracias Toby, Jim, welcome to Colombia.
Mucho gusto.
We hope in join us at Sala Colombia.
Yes, and some bayonata de oro. Música.
Thank you guys, have a good one and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Vámonos a la sala principal.